Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. If you are an educator, or you have a friend who is an educator, you might have seen some recent posts on the social media about something called the PARCC test. You might have seen how some parents are opting out. You might have seen how some students are protesting and refuse to take the test. If you're outside of education, you might be thinking, big deal. It's just another annual assessment, just another standardized test. I mean, I know they aren't all that fun, but it can't be that bad, can it? To shed some light on this test, today I bring you 10 facts about PARCC. So let's start with what PARCC is. PARCC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. It's a standardized test which falls into the category of SBA for Standards-Based Assessment. PARCC is created by Pearson, which is non-for-profit, but is connected to a very well-known profit agency, Pearson Inc. The average person might have a hard time telling the difference between the two. I know I do. PARCC is generally considered the go-to assessment for Common Core, the newest wave in the standards-based education movement. So while the first fact shares some surface-level information about the PARCC test, you might have some more questions. Questions like, what's with the whole standardized testing thing? Standardized tests have been around for a while, but it wasn't until the 80s when standards-based education first took root. But education has always been a state issue. Because of that, education standards have varied from state to state. In recent history, the Common Core has moved the country towards a singularly unified set of education standards. This sounds nice, but the accountability towards the standards ignores outside factors like home life, socioeconomic status, general learning styles, or, you know, being an individual. Human. While every state has their own annual assessment based on state standards, the PARCC test moves towards Common Core standards. There were originally 23 states slotted to utilize PARCC. This year, however, only 12 states are jumping on the PARCC bandwagon. I spent another video talking about the history of standards-based education if that interests you. It's rather fascinating and slightly unnerving. Wait, one whole test for the whole nation? Is that really a bad thing? Perhaps it wouldn't be so bad if there weren't some other factors that make the test particularly frustrating. One of the biggest arguments against the PARCC test, how long it takes to take the test. Let's do some math. There are two administrations of the PARCC assessment. One that happens at approximately the 75% point of the year and one that happens at the 90% point of the year. The first test has 5 units. The second has 4. One teacher shared online the length of time for each test according to the testing manual. From the time the student enters the room until the time the next unit can be started are the first series of language arts tests, the first series of mathematics tests, the second series of language arts tests, the second series of mathematics tests. This is a total of 935 minutes or 15.5 hours of time spent in the testing room. Let's not forget that PARCC likely won't be the only standardized test that these students take during one school year cycle. But time lengths for testing are not the only controversial issue for PARCC. Another would be the monetary investment. $30 per test. That's what Pearson charges to give the schools the results. Now look at how many kids are in your district. And then think back to the last time something was cut because of lack of funds. But that's not the only cost associated with PARCC. The PARCC must be taken on an internet-connected computer. Minimum device to student ratio is 5:1. This means in a school of 1,000 students, there must be at least 200 computers available to rotate through the test. In addition, the operating system of the computer must be relatively up to date. In the state of New Mexico, one of the poorest in the countries, technology has not been unilaterally implemented throughout New Mexico public schools prior to this mandate. So we have this huge influx of new technology to be installed all at once, with huge costs to the districts and little money left over for training on the tech. Gee, I don't see anything wrong with this. There's a buy which allows 20% of the school population to take the test on paper. Albuquerque Public Schools is using this leniency to have their 3rd grade population take the PARCC test on paper. Wise, especially if you consider they may have never touched a computer before. Plop a bunch of kids on technology and they'll magically understand it, right? They've grown up with tech. I'm sure they all have technology fluency even without us trying. Also, don't forget the contracts made with state education. In New Mexico, the Public Education Department has negotiated a $6.2 million contract with Pearson to implement PARCC statewide. That is lots of money, friend. Time and money. And then think about what doesn't happen during the PARCC test. Testing has thrown my schedule out the window. I won't see my kids for 8 of the next 10 days, all because they need more certified teachers present to proctor exams and gave all my classes to a sub. I don't want to go to work these next 2 weeks, not because I don't love my job, but because we're PARCC testing, and I don't see all of my students for 2 weeks. No PE, even for students not sitting for a test. Whatever happened to No Child Left on Her Behind? The results of all this testing. Not so much teaching. 935 minutes of no instruction. Not to mention, we're not even sure this assessment is a good assessment. The PARCC test is pretty darn new, so those who like to analyze tests haven't had much of an opportunity to do so with this one, but those who have had the chance are rather appalled. I'll put a bunch of links in the doobly-doo, but experts have challenged the readability of the test as well as the appropriateness of content for various grades. Not to mention that several answer keys have been found to be incorrect, which isn't a first. Listen. The overly zealous readability may be purposeful. If that's true, it is chilling. On this topic, one expert said, many analysts say that the mass failure is precisely the goal of the people who design Common Core tests. If they define mastery as reading and doing math 2 grades above current grade level, then by definition, all but a tiny fraction of students will fail, and these experts can proclaim that public education is a failure and must be abolished. It's an evil plan worthy of an evil genius. These tests are determined at the state government level. Once the state education officials decide which test will be enacted, all districts must comply. This means that 2 people in each state are definitely in favor of the PARCC test: the state education secretary and the governor. The administrators and teachers in each district have no choice in the matter. Theirs is a job of execution, not one to make choices or show opposition. The school must execute the test because the results are used in school and teacher evaluations. On a personal level, many educators, both in administration and in the classroom, dislike PARCC testing because they see how it affects students throughout the day. There is also a general fear that this focus on testing will make students equate education with testing and not discovery, engagement, and curiosity. Depending on state and district parameters, some students are opting out of PARCC testing. And while this allowance has been made, it does get a bit dicey. Opting out exists, but most districts would prefer not everybody does this. Some states have agreed that you can offer the option to opt out. But if too many students opt out, that's no good. You'll get fined for that. You might even go down in your overall school rating. No. We'll sort of go along with this, but not really. Because of the non-committal stance on opting out among the plethora of other issues associated with the PARCC test, some students have begun to protest outside their schools rather than sitting for the test. The public response to these students has been mixed. Some see them as brave, independent young thinkers. Others see them as losers, simply trying to get out of class. One thing is clear: these young thinkers are getting a lot of attention from the media. Despite everything that might be wrong with PARCC and standardized testing in general, teachers are doing their very best to keep students engaged and excited about school. You can find entire Pinterest boards dedicated to helping student motivation throughout testing. But my favorite things are the teachers who are willing to be just a smidgen silly to put smiles on their students' faces. Click to see examples. There's a population of people who say, this is just another annual assessment, but more than that, it's a better annual assessment because it's reflective of the new, improved, and unified standard system, Common Core. The evidence that I have found is that PARCC is just another annual assessment, but it's neither financially solvent, time efficient, developmentally appropriate, and it is not about students at all. These tests are used primarily for school and teacher evaluation. The students themselves receive very little kudos for their tedious and stressful work on the PARCC test. When education is no longer about students, that is when I think we need to rethink the educational path we are traversing. But for now, a haiku. It is much more than an annual assessment. 10 facts about PARCC. I don't ask this a lot, but if you found the information in this video informative, would you please consider liking and/or sharing? Knowledge is power, friends. Thank you. PARCC stands for the Partnership for Readiness of Assessment. I did that one wrong. PARCC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness. PARCC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. PARCC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. I had crazy eyes during that last take. I know I did. Must get words. PARCC stands for the Partnership for PARCC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness. PARCC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. Bam!